Hey, what is going on, guys? Welcome to the fourth episode of the Mike Bartner Show. We are not live if you're watching this later. Something happened with the live stream. For some reason, it wasn't letting me schedule it. I don't know what's happening with that. On Tuesday, I'm going to figure it out because we had two successful live shows after the first debacle. But today's going to be a pretty loaded show. Obviously, I only did one show this week, so we actually have some pretty decent topics within the hockey world considering we're in the off season instead of me doing two shows a week like previously where I'd have to kind of pick and choose stories. We have a full week of hockey things, and especially given the headline of this show, the Mike Babcock situation, we're going to have a lot to dive into today, and I'm really looking forward to it. We're going to go through the Babcock situation. We're going to go through the two Canadian captains. That feels like a month ago that Adam Lowry and Quinn Hughes were announced. Atlanta 3.0 is apparently happening. There was an interview with the deputy commissioner, Bill Daly. We're going to go over that. And then at the end, you saw on my Instagram, if you follow me there, or on Twitter, I did ranking every Eastern Conference team's starting goalie. We're going to do that in the West. We're going to break it down fully. So without further ado, let's get into the Mike Babcock stuff. This comes from Jack Brownlee. Hey, Mike, wanted to get your thoughts on the Babcock situation. Their organization and PR shot it down, but now the NHLPA is saying some guys were uncomfortable with Babcock. Do you think he'll get fired? So, yeah, this obviously has been the story of the week on, Tuesday or Wednesday? Spin and Chicklets released this clip basically going in depth on Mike Babcock allegedly asking various Blue Jackets players to see their phones, then airplaying their photos on his office TV. Obviously, a pretty serious claim. That's a pretty big invasion of privacy. And Spin and Chicklets really held their ground and said, yeah, we had multiple players come tell us this, both current Blue Jacket players as well as former Leafs and Red Wings players being like, Babcock's doing his old stuff. So when you look at this situation, obviously the Columbus Blue Jackets immediately denied it. There was this whole PR statement. Meeting with our players, I asked them to share their phones, this is from Babcock, family pictures, as a part of the process to get them know better, which seems pretty standard. Then Boone Jenner said that Babcock basically asked him about his family and wanted to see pictures of his family. So from the Blue Jackets perspective, PR perspective, they released a statement. And I think with Boone Jenner, my personal 2 cents is, I think with some of the older guys, he probably did just want to get to know their family because he's not going to go after Boone Jenner when he's on the job for 2 months. So I do think there is some validity to this PR statement. But I just have a hard time thinking that Spitting Chicklets would make this up out of nowhere, and especially when you consider the history of a guy like Mike Babcock. So like most things, I don't think Babcock maybe did it to the extent that Paul Bissonnette was saying, but I'm not ready to exonerate Babcock as a whole, given his reputation. And Biz really didn't back down. Biz tweeted out to this PR statement. He said, tell Babs to knock off the bull. I'm not going to curse on YouTube. Enough with putting guys on the spot in the coaching room, asking them to link their phones up to airplay mode and grilling them. I've had a ton of players confirm it. Smarten the up, Babs. Shove your statement up his arse. So yeah, they're not backing down. And if I'm Paul Bissonnette and I'm getting these sources from these players, I wouldn't back down either, because Spin Chicklets got a lot of hate for this. And if you're going to do such a bold claim, you better have legit sources, or else rightfully so, you're going to get called out on your bullshit. So it looks like they're not backing down right now. And now the NHL is really looking into it. Obviously, the Players Association, we're going to look into this. But now there's kind of some legitimacy to the claim that recently came out. This was from last night from Elliot Friedman. Marty Walsh and the player executive director, Ron Hainsey, legendary player, had a meeting with the Blue Jackets. It was described as intense at following the story from Paul Bissonnette. They were satisfied with the explanations from Boone Jenner and Johnny Gaudreau. However, it appears that things changed for both later that night when information was received that some of the younger Blue Jackets players were uncomfortable with what had happened. That appears to be the major focus of the investigation. And then it just goes on to say that they're cooperating. They have their prospect tourney this weekend. And at the bottom, Babcock has done similar stuff, whether it be in Detroit or Toronto. So that's kind of what I always thought. I never really thought that he was grilling Boone Jenner, the captain that's been there for 10 years. But when you look at what he did in Toronto, what he did in Detroit, it makes sense that a coach in that position of power would go after some of the young guys and try to basically bully them, instill in them that I'm the guy. You gotta like smarten up. You operate under me. I am your superior. It's not a collaboration. I am the supreme leader. So when looking at this, maybe you look at some of their young guys, were they grilled by Mike Babcock? I think it's perfectly reasonable, especially when you look at a situation with him in Toronto, Mike Babcock, the Mitch Marner situation. This does not help Babcock's case when you realize that Marner, in his rookie year, was asked to list out who he thought the laziest players on the Toronto Maple Leafs were that season. And wait, let me just pull this up. He was asked on a father's trip. He was asked to list the laziest players on the Toronto Maple Leafs from an effort level. He put himself last, which you kind of got to respect. But when he showed Babcock the list, Babcock then went to Nazem Kadri and Tyler Bozak, who were also like apparently kind of low on the list, and showed them. So his like rookie hazing, Babcock literally just went to players and basically said, Marner called you lazy. Even though Marner didn't want to do that goddamn exercise, he did it again. Babcock made him do it. Obviously, he was going to put himself last, and he had to put some people at the bottom. So you look at Babcock, he has this tyrannical, borderline abusive history in his past with some of these young guys. So I do think it is possible that you look at an Adam Fantilli, you look at a Kent Johnson, a Kirill Marchenko. I wouldn't be surprised if Bob Babcock pulled one of these things. I'm not saying that he did it, but that does kind of fit in with his narrative that maybe he tried to exert his will and kind of show dominance over these guys by being like, let me see your goddamn phone. Like, no funny business anymore. This is unacceptable or stuff like that. So I think it's perfectly reasonable. And just another Babcock incident that I want to bring up is Johan Franzen literally said that Mike Babcock was the worst person he had ever met. Johan Franzen obviously played for the Red Wings for basically his entire career from like 2005 to like 2013, 2014. And this is a quote from Franzen. He described Babcock as a great coach, but he was the worst person he's ever met. He's a bully who attacks people. Couldn't be cleaner. It couldn't be clearer at the arena or in Detroit or anyone else. He would lay into people without any reason. And according to Chris Chelios, Babcock once blatantly verbally assaulted Franzen during the game on the bench, and it got to the point where Johan, without anybody knowing that he was already suffering from a concussion and depression, broke down and had a nervous breakdown on the bench and after the game in the dressing room. So you look at Mike Babcock, he is a guy that absolutely rides players, doesn't care about like societal norms, mental health, all that stuff. So you have this guy, and now you have the Players Association coming out and saying, yeah, some of the players were pretty uncomfortable with what he did. I think I'm probably gonna more so believe that the young players might have been, and maybe it wasn't like a straight through the phone, but did Babcock probably grill them intentionally and said, yo, show me your phone, let me see some of these pictures. I don't think that he was gonna like throw anybody off the team over it, but it definitely was something that made them uncomfortable. So in the coming days, we're going to have to see how this goes. And in today's NHL, a more player-driven league, you can't do this kind of crap, especially if you're Babcock. This isn't 2009 Babcock coming off a Stanley Cup. He doesn't have that pedigree. He's on his fourth job now, and after being out of the league for 3 years, I don't know why he thought, if this is the case, why he thought that he could pull this stuff, but it seems like maybe he hasn't learned. I honestly, I mean, like, I hope this is still not true, just because I don't want the players to go through this, but right now, I would lean towards something did happen between Babcock and maybe some of the younger players, but we're going to have to find out. We got to let the NHLPA do their full investigation, and I'm really looking forward to it. As to, I think the question asked, do I think he's going to get fired? If it does come out and one player says, yeah, he took my phone, he went through my pictures, and then he grilled me, I think given the history, I think he might have to be fired. It'll be a disaster because Columbus brought this guy in. I don't know why. They knew that this might have happened. This would probably happen. So, but I think there's so much public pressure. This story has not really died down since Tuesday or Wednesday, whenever it dropped. So I think if we actually get some serious findings in this, if there's a guy willing to speak up, I wouldn't be surprised if Babcock is fired with it by the end of next week. It wouldn't be that surprising. But moving on, a more positive topic. We got some new Canadian captains. Andrew Finnegan writes in, this week we got 2 new captains in the NHL. Definitely untraditional picks with Lowry and Hughes, but just wanted your thoughts on it. Let me just take a little sip of my coffee. So yeah, there was 10 captaincy vacancies heading into this year. We just got 2 filled, obviously Quinn Hughes and Adam Lowry. And yeah, a little bit of untraditional picks. Quinn Hughes is obviously a stud, but he's a very soft-spoken guy, so maybe that was surprising that you didn't really see coming. I'll get into that more. And Adam Lowry, a third liner, not your best player, but I do like the picks. Looking at Quinn Hughes first, I mean, you look at this guy's resume, and he's another stud. He is a franchise defenseman, probably top 40 player in the entire league. 241 points, 283 games. That's insane for a defenseman. Fastest defenseman to ever hit 200 assists in NHL history. He's received Norris votes 3 out of 4 years. Led rookies in assists and points as a defenseman. He's a franchise defenseman. He might not be the most talked about, outspoken guy in the league, like from a vocal leadership standpoint, but sometimes leaders don't have to be the guy that yells dogs at a teammate. It can be a more soft-spoken approach. I know in my experience, sometimes the louder, more vocal coaches that I've had in the past are not that good of leaders, because when you're just yelling and so passionate, sometimes it goes over your head versus a more soft-spoken guy that, like, when they do speak up, you shut the hell up. You know what I'm saying? Like that soft guy that just sits in the locker room and, like, is just to himself, a good guy overall, but, like, the one time that he blows up or the one time that he, like, gets on you, you're like, aye, captain. Like, I am not messing with that. So I think with Quinn Hughes, especially given the fact he's only 23, I think he's really going to grow into this. And another reason why I think this is the right pick is it was obviously going to be between Hughes and Pettersson. I don't think I'm, like, shocking anybody with that. After Bo Horvat left, they weren't going to give it to JT Miller because he's had his media fiascos, not the most likable guy. Might be traded. I don't know. Like it was between Quinn Hughes and Pettersson, and you look at Pettersson, and reports come out that he's not sure about his future. He's probably going to end up signing some type of deal in Vancouver just because he's a restricted free agent. But reports came out that the length of his deal or whether he'll resign is going to have a lot to do with team success. In terms of my captain, as much as I do respect Pettersson for saying that, because that is like the truth. Let's be honest. I respect like the reports from Elliot Friedman coming out like that. That's more relatable than I want to be a Vancouver Canuck forever. Like I can understand why he wants to win, but as a captain, as a PR move, you're gonna give the captaincy to the guy that has 4 more years left on his deal and has seemed to be like bled Vancouver, although might head to the Devils eventually. But he's been all about the Vancouver Canucks since he arrived and has term on his deal. Versus a Pettersson guy where he has 1 year left on his deal. You give him the captaincy. Imagine you stink and then he wants out and you have a 1 year captain. That'd be worse than like the Mark Giordano captaincy that literally lasted like 50 games. So I think it is the right call. They don't have any. The Winnipeg Jets, we'll get into that with the third liner, but I don't think there was anybody even deeper in the lineup that really deserved that from Vancouver because they've had a lot of roster turnover over the past couple years. So it was obviously between Hughes and Pettersson. Maybe Demko, but he wanted out at one point. So I think Quinn Hughes is definitely the right choice. In terms of the next 5 years, it's a solid pick. In terms of Adam Lowry, I also like the Adam Lowry one. In my opinion, he's one of the toughest, most physical centers in the entire league. He sets the tone on that third line checking line, and he's actually a pretty decent player. He's pretty underrated. He consistently is just a solid two-way guy. He's not going to give you 50 plus points, 25 plus goals, but he's good for like 30 to 35 to 40 points. And again, he keeps that effort high, and he's been drafted by Winnipeg. He's a Winnipeg lifer. So you want that guy to kind of be your captain going into that next stage. And like with Winnipeg, obviously you weren't going to give the seat to Connor Hellebuck or Mark Scheifele. They're expiring UFAs. Josh Morrissey would have been a solid pick. He's been there for a while, but I think in terms of what I've seen from the community before he was announced as a captain, the community, the teams, the fans, Adam Lowry is arguably the most respected guy in that locker room. And sometimes the best player doesn't have to be captain. I look back to my New York Islanders. Lee's the captain. He's not the best player. Andy Green was the Devils captain for like a decade. He was a very good captain, wasn't their best player. Jordan Stahl is the Hurricanes captain. He's like their third line center at this point, similar to Adam Lowry. So I don't think you don't need to have your best player be the captain. one point that I did see that does make a lot of sense is my good friend Alyssa Hood said, sometimes with Winnipeg, it happened with Blake Wheeler. Sometimes they play their captains more ice time because he's captain, because they like want to respect him, and he's like arguably the face of the, not the face of the franchise, but like he's the most respected guy within the franchise. So I can see that from that perspective. If Adam Lowry is sniffing 16 minutes a night, gets like a boosted role, then maybe that's not that good. But I hopefully Rick Bowness, a guy that's been around for a long time, doesn't feel obligated to play Lowry more just because he's the captain. I don't think that's going to happen. But yeah, that's my only concern with it. But overall, I think it's a solid pick. Maybe would have gotten Morrissey. Kyle Connor doesn't really scream captain to me. Ehlers doesn't really scream captain. Maybe you could have waited until like Perfetti in 3 or 4 years, but yeah, you're not going to go 4 years without a captain. But overall, I think Adam Lowry has some term left on his deal, and even after that, he seems like a guy that's going to re-sign in Ottawa or Winnipeg. But it's solid. It's Winnipeg, so it's like not that. It's pretty fitting that they give the center to a third line center. But moving on. Next question. This really shocked me. I love it. Atlanta Thrashers 3.0. This comes from Jesse Zeiderveld. I saw a picture on Puck. I saw Punk at. All right, let's restart that. This is from Jesse Zeiderveld. I saw Puck Empire post that the NHL is seriously considering a return to Atlanta. Please tell me this is a joke. No way they should get that third shot while Quebec City can't get a second. Technically, Quebec City, the Nordiques were their second shot. They had a team in like 1919, but I get what you mean. Obviously, there has been some push towards Atlanta getting a team. There's been intense blowback, and I understand why people don't want a team in Atlanta because they've seen it multiple times. But when looking at this interview with Bill Daly that they do, and I've always said, I think an Atlanta team could potentially work. This might sound crazy, but I do agree that there might be some market factors that have changed in the past couple years that do make it more favorable versus when they were the Atlanta Flames versus when they were the Atlanta Thrashers. And let's look at that article right now. So obviously, Greg Winooski, or however you pronounce it, did a very good article on this. And in it, Bill Daly said, I think that there's some changes. I think times have changed pretty dramatically, and the market demographics have changed pretty dramatically since the first time we went there, and then again in 1990. I think a lot of bigger businesses are in Atlanta now, which does make sense. And then he said the Atlanta market is much different. He said the location of the rink will be key to success. He points to how they used to play at the State Farm Arena with the Atlanta Hawks, and it was a mess. And also, when you look at the Atlanta Braves, they switched fields. They built a new field, and it ended up being fantastic. And when you look at Atlanta, he is right. Since 1999, Atlanta has exploded massively. Looking at the Atlanta population, it was 3.3 million back in 1999, which is still a massive market, but now it's 6.1%. You look at that annual change percentage, it has been growing at about a 3 to 4% rate on average since 1999. It has exploded in population. So as a result, it's the sixth biggest metro area in the entire United States. You compare that to like a Quebec City, which was 681,000 back in 1999 versus today, 844. It's only been growing at barely even 1%. So you look at it in terms of the market has almost doubled in Atlanta for a potential team. That is important when looking at an NHL franchise versus Quebec City that has grown like 25-30% at most. The Atlanta market is so much bigger, and maybe now it could support a team. I'm not saying it's going to be like ever be a massive, massive success, but you look at some other southern markets. This tweet from Grav really put it in perspective. Vegas was first in attendance. Nashville was fourth in attendance. Carolina was 10th. Tampa Bay was 11th. Dallas was 13th. Hockey has grown, especially in these untraditional markets, these southern markets. So I think potentially going back to Atlanta could be successful when you consider that the first Atlanta time, they only made the playoffs, I believe, once in 12 years. As much as you want to say it, the success initially of an expansion team is essential to its success. If you have that track record, you could have put a team in a very, very good market, and it wouldn't be that successful if you had one playoff success in 12 years. Capturing that initial market share by your team being good right off the rip instead of stinking for a decade, then maybe you get good. That is massive. You look at the Vegas Golden Knights. Do we think that if they first year were a bottom 6 team, then maybe bottom 10, then maybe bottom 15, then they were like a decent, okay playoff team, do we think that they would be nearly as successful as today? No, right off the rip. Well, also, if they were the first team in Vegas, so I guess that is a little bit different situation. But even Seattle, second year, make the playoffs. The initial success is massive, and Atlanta just had horrible ownership, horrible management that ruined them in terms of a team. I think if you brought in a successful ownership group, as well as actually manage the team properly and can have some success right off the rip, I don't see, again, why maybe they won't be top 5 like Nashville and Vegas, but could they have solid attendance numbers? Could they, given the population of that market, draw decent revenue streams from either merchandise, TV, all that? I think it's definitely possible. I think it is definitely possible. I don't think the culture between like Nashville, maybe Raleigh's a little bit different, but like say Nashville and Atlanta, I don't see the argument on how Nashville can be such a success for the NHL. Again, fourth and 10. It doesn't have the biggest valuation just because it's not the biggest city, but I don't see how you can see Tennessee, which I believe, borders Atlanta, both very southern markets. That's about as southern as you can get, besides like Mississippi, Alabama, but they're not putting a team there, obviously. Those are two of the most southern markets in the entire United States. Nashville was a success. They've had some success from team perspective, not really initially, but like the past decade, they've been a massive success. I don't know how you cannot look at that and say, Atlanta can never be successful. I think given another chance in the market, and Nashville is like a third of the size of Atlanta, I don't know why people are just shutting down Atlanta as a potential spot. I can see why maybe you would want to go to Quebec City. Quebec City is the safer option, but again, looking at the population difference, 844,000. And mind you, I think Quebec as a whole is like 5-6 million people, and like 3 to 4 million of that is in Montreal. The market share and the marketability and the upward potential of that franchise is just not that big. And overall, looking at Quebec City, I know some people really were turned off by the NHL and don't really watch the NHL anymore, but they're all still hockey fans. For the most part, they'll watch some NHL games. They're still involved in the league, involved in hockey as a whole. People in the Atlanta, Georgia area, I have family in the Atlanta, Georgia area, they do not care at all because they don't have a team. They're not going to root for Nashville, who's like a 3-4 hour drive. They don't care at all. So in Quebec City, you're missing out on like a 1 million area population in terms of fans. The Georgia, Atlanta area is like 10 million, 15 million people in total that just do not care about hockey at all. So in terms of bringing in new fans to the game, Quebec City, they love hockey. They're diehard hockey fans. In terms of growing the game, I think going to an Atlanta does have far more upside for the NHL. You look at Seattle, they're already like the 10th highest valued franchise in the entire league and had like top 10 attendance this year. So why can't, well, I guess Seattle's a little bit different than Atlanta, but why can't an Atlanta work on a second go if a Nashville, if a Tampa, if a Dallas, if a Carolina have all been decently successful for the league? I'm not going to act like they're the Montreal Canadiens, the Toronto Maple Leafs, but they have been decently successful. So I don't see why you can't go back to Atlanta and at least try. I would move Arizona to Atlanta in a heartbeat. I would keep Arizona, but no, I wouldn't keep Arizona. But I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying, but let's move on to the next topic. The next topic that we're going to be looking at is ranking every starting goalie in the Western Conference. We are going to be starting. We'll start with one. Because you can probably assume who I have at number 1 in terms of Western starting goalies. Number 1 is UC Saros. This shouldn't be that controversial, but UC Saros over the past 3 years has led the entire NHL and goals saved above expected the last 3 years in total, because Sorokin wasn't really playing too much 2-3 years ago. Same with Shesterkin. He has been a top 5 goalie each of the last 3 years. He's posted a 927, then a 918, then a 919. And mind you, the last 2 years, they have not been that good of a team in front of him. They've been injured. The defense has not nearly been as good, and he has still posted fantastic results. I think he's better than our number 2 in Connor Hellebuck. Hellebuck's also fantastic. Hellebuck's 6 years has been insanely consistent. He's been over a 910 every single year. He's been a Vezina finalist 3 out of those 6 years. I don't think he should have been last year, but he definitely should have been 4th. And last year, he was 4th in the entire NHL with 30.8 expected goals, saved above expected, But you look at him, I think he does need to get out of Winnipeg. He just needs to go to a team where he doesn't have to play 65 games a year. And I think he can be even better because you look at him this year, he kind of gassed towards the end of the year. He started out the first 2 to 3 months. He was kind of the Vezina favorite because Ullmark, we were still like, this isn't legit. He's not going to keep this up. But Connor Hellebuck was legit like 9-27 with 2-3-5 in a sick record when the Winnipeg Jets were leading the Central Division. He was the Vezina favorite, but again, he has so many miles on him. 4 out of the last 6 years, he's led the entire league in saves and games started. So hopefully he ages fine, but I hope he just gets out of Winnipeg for his own sake so he doesn't have to play so much. Stud goalie, easily my 5th best goalie in the NHL. Moving on, Jake Ottinger. Jake Ottinger, I think the hype is a little bit too high right now. He's a very good goalie. I don't think that he's an elite goalie right now. Last year, he posted a solid .919 and a 2.35 as well as 11.8 goals saved above expected. I keep on flubbing up that word, which was, I believe, 14th in the entire NHL. So his first 3 years, he's been all above a .910. He's a very good goalie. We got to see him get to that next gear yet. He obviously helped lead the Dallas Stars to Western Conference Finals. He had a couple bad games, but besides that, overall, he was pretty solid. He's going to be in the Vezina talks this year, I think, just because Dallas is going to be such a good team. Is he actually as good as a Shesterkin, a Saros, a Sorokin? I don't think quite yet, but he's only 24 years old. That's the other thing. I see he's definitely getting overhyped by some people as being like the next great American goalie or the next just goalie period in the NHL. I think some of that's ridiculous, but also people are shitting on him, and it's like, dude, he's 24 years old, and he did just post like a top 10 goalie season. He's going to be very good. Shesterkin and Saros. Shesterkin, Saros, Sorokin weren't even starting at full-time at age 24. Meanwhile, he's playing 62 games a year. He's going to be a stud. Next up, I got Thatcher Demko. Pretty controversial guy. He posted back-to-back seasons of .915 save percentage, was pretty easily a top 12 goalie, probably top 10. But then he stunk to start this year. Looking at the stats, he posted a 4-10-2 record with an 883 and a 3.75. The Canucks as a whole were brutal. If you remember, they lost their first 9 or 10 games, and he was part of that for sure. But then he got hurt, comes back from injury. Down the stretch, he posted a 918 and a 253. I tend to think that he's closer to that goalie that he showed down the stretch of being an elite guy in the 910s versus absolute dog in the 880s. So I think he's closer to that. Maybe I have him a couple spots too high on this, but I'm willing to bet on a bounce back because he has carried pretty bad Vancouver Canucks teams to decent records over the past couple years. He's a stud, no doubt, number one. Philip Gustafsson, weird guy to rank because on a per game basis, it was either him and Ullmark for the best goalie in the entire NHL last year. He posted a 931 and a 210. I just haven't really seen that track record yet. It was only 39 games. He wasn't that good in Ottawa the prior year. So I think the Minnesota system overall, I'm going to talk about it with another guy that's a lot lower on the list. Minnesota goalies tend to put up good numbers in part just because Minnesota's defensive system is so effective. They have such great defensemen. Their forwards forecheck all the time. They're just an elite defensive team. So that might have something to do with it. But like a Jake Ottinger, Gustafsson's I think still only 24 years old. So even if he wasn't actually the second pure game best goalie in the entire league, I think going forward he's going to be a very good starter. I hope he gets the lion's share of the starts over Fleury. I could see them for some reason feeding Fleury. I think that'd be the wrong call. Next up, Alexander Georgiev. He was a guy in the New York Rangers that was very inconsistent. I watch a decent amount of Ranger games just because I'm from the New Jersey area. But it was either he balled out, had a shutout, or one goal against on a 950 plus save percentage, or he'd get lit the hell up. It was really consistency with them. He always had the flashes of the talent, but obviously the Rangers decided to go with Shesterkin, clearly the right call. Basically told Georgiev to pack his bags, and he was very good for the Avalanche in his first season. I think he had a 910, very good advanced stats as well. It's going to be interesting to see because we saw Philip Grubauer be a Vezina finalist, although he was overrated even in that season, and then he left and he wasn't that good. Or is he a Darcy Kemper that is just a good goalie that got plugged into that Colorado system but can produce without? we won't know until he eventually heads to a different team if that ever happens. So right now I can't put him too high, but the stats are undeniable. He had a great record last year, 62 starts, I think. He like almost led the entire NHL in starts, as well as 919 in good expected goals. I think he is a top 15 goalie right now. You got to give him up that track record. Although Colorado is fantastic, you don't just accidentally start 60 games and put up good numbers like that. Moving on to number 7, Vejmelka. This is a weird one. He posted an 899 and a 343, but his advanced stats were fantastic. He was just on a horrible Coyotes team. That jersey is sick. I might have to get that, a Clayton Keller version of that. But he posted fantastic advanced stats. He was like 13th in the entire league in goals saved above expected. He was pretty bad his first year, but again, the Coyotes are just so bad. I think on a better team, he'd be a good starter. I think he'd be able to post like a 914 as well as decent advanced stats. Obviously, posted decent advanced stats in Arizona, but I think he's an underrated guy that has a track record now and going forward. Arizona should be a good team next year, and I think he's going to take that next step and get that respect because Arizona won't be so bad next year. He's not going to be put up like an 899. I could see him put up like a 907 next year, a 3.1, which still isn't that good, but considering Arizona's number one defenseman is like Valimaki, those are pretty good numbers. Next up, Adin Hill. I'm going to get called recency bias for this, and I understand it because he did have that fantastic salary. Salary. I almost said salary cap instead of Stanley Cup. He had that fantastic Stanley Cup run of a 932 and a 217, but I don't think it's that much recency bias. He has been a very good backup the past couple of years. He has a 913 and a 261, as well as decent advanced stats in terms of the last 4 years in a backup role, and he's only 26 years old, so I think this is just him kind of breaking out. I think next year on a Vegas team, he could start 50, 55 games. The other problem is Logan Thompson's like almost as good as him, in my opinion. So it'll be interesting to see which one. You could probably replace the two, and they're like about the same on this list. But I think Adin Hill, if you let him run with it, he can give you a 915 full season. I don't think that's ridiculous at all. Maybe even a 916, 917, just because Vegas is that good, as well as 30 to 33 wins, let's say. I think he's really going to surprise some people. He's not going to be posting a 932 like he did in the playoffs, but I think he's going to be a solid starter. I know I'm going to get shit on for that, but I'll take it. Stuart Skinner, very solid rookie year, posted a 913 and a 275, and had like a 3 goals saved above expected. He's only 24, 25 years old, so I think he's only going to progress. At this point, he's an average to above average starter. I think next year he's going to be an above average starter. Will he get to like a Vezina level? I could see him maybe like being Vezina talks a year or two, just because the Edmonton Oilers are such a good team that he wins 37 games one year or 39 games one year and posts a 921 and 2-3. Like, I can see that, but like in terms of talent, I don't know if he has that kind of talent. He's just in a fantastic spot. But overall, I think he's a solid goalie. He kind of shat the bed in the playoffs. Don't get me wrong. That was kind of very disappointing, but I'm not gonna let one series versus the Kings and the Knights completely change my opinion on him, especially because he is so young. I think he's only gonna get better. Markstrom, I might get some hate for having Markstrom behind Skinner, but again, Skinner was no doubt better last year and is younger. Who do we think is gonna have the better season next year? I'm gonna go with the younger and guy that was better last year. Markstrom was the Vezina runner-up 2 years ago, but even I think that was overrated. You look at him from an advanced stats point, goals saved above expected, he was 12th in the entire league. That year, 2022, Freddie, Saros, Vasilevsky all should have finished ahead of him in the Vezina. He just racked up a bunch of wins and had a good save percentage and good goals against on a pretty loaded Flames team. He was definitely good, don't get me wrong, but I think that 2022 Vezina runner-up is a little overrated. People are going to cite this when they say, oh, he's way too low. I don't think he is, but he's still okay. He had an 899 this year, which was 892, which was the worst of his career. He lets up some of the worst goals in the entire league. Like, whatever, like, what's this thing with him? Like, the first shot, he like lets up the most first shot in the league goals. Like, he needs to just be more consistent. I think he can bounce back, but he is 32 or 33, so his best days are probably behind him. I don't think that's that controversial. The Flames would be lucky to get average to above average starter play out of him. They're going to have to move off that contract once Dustin Wolf is ready to go, but it's going to be very interesting. Next up, Philip Grubauer. This 11 and 12 is going to be a little tough for me. I honestly don't know who to choose. Grubauer was absolutely horrendous last year. He posted one of the worst goalie seasons ever in terms of stats. But also, Seattle was just a horrible team last year, so I can't really hold it too much against him. The advanced stats are bad, but when you start so bad on such a bad team, you're not going to rally the rest of the way. This year, again, he didn't have the best regular stats. They were pretty below average, but he did post a negative 0.7 goals saved above expected, so he was about average during the regular season. And then he was massive in terms of the playoffs for them in that first round against Colorado. He really stood on his head. He was very good in the first couple games against Dallas. He did get lit up in the final 3 games, but I think going forward, you can rely on him to be an okay average starting goalie, which stinks because they still have 4 more years at $6 million, 5.9 that they're paying him. But I think Grubauer, he wasn't a Vezina. When he was a Vezina finals in Colorado, that was absolute BS. But he's not as bad as he was the following year, first year in Seattle. I think he's somewhere in the middle there of the 21st or 22nd best starting goalie in the entire league. I think that's about fair. Next up is oh my God, we got Gibson. Next up, we got Gibson. Weird guy, man. I think he is overrated just because of what he did in prior years. I don't think that he's horrendous. If you go off just what he did in the last 4 years, he has consistently been bad. He's posted an average negative 12 goals saved above expected in the past 4 years. He has not had a single good year, and it is in part because the Ducks are a bad team. But you look at this guy, he's not the player that he used to be, and sometimes that happens with these goalies that start off so hot when they're young. The mileage just starts to rack up. It's what I hope doesn't happen with Connor Hellebuck. But he started out fantastic, and also because the Ducks did have a very good defense core back then. But he started when they had Manson, Lindholm, Fowler. They were loaded. But yeah, the mile has finally caught up to him. Can he be an okay starter this year, or okay starter if he got traded? I think it's possible, but the days of him being in Vezina talks 2017, 2018, I think that's well done, well gone. Still, I can't. If you blind resume him the last 4 years, he would have a case to be 15 or 16. I'm gonna somewhat respect him just because of what he's done prior. Maybe he can find that gear, but as of right now, I don't know. Number 13, Phoenix Copley, an okay 1B. It is a little scary that LA is heading into the season probably as him as their 1A. Cam Talbot's up there too, but we'll see who gets the starting job. I put Copley just because he was a decent starter last year. He posted a 9.03 with a 2.63. So those are okay, not ideal. They're okay by today's standards. I think the average save percentage is 9.06. He's okay. It's nothing special, but if you can give them a 9.08, that'll be a very solid year for him. He's definitely probably the 30th best goalie in hockey, I'd say. There's a lot of backups. There's a couple backups that are better than him. It's not good for LA. Binnington, number 14, he had a 9.01 and a 3.13 last year when the Blues were a 110-point team. He still sucked. Then this year, he absolutely falls off a cliff with an 8.94 and a 3.31. It's just been a steady decline to the point, and given his attitude, given how he's just a psychopath, I don't think he's going to turn it around. It has been rookie year fantastic, then above average starter, then average, then the past 2 years bad. I don't think he's going to turn it around. I would say I hope he turns it around, but he's such an unlikable guy that I really don't. Yeah. Not cool. Not a cool guy. Kaapo Kähkönen, weird goalie. He's still pretty young. He was very good in Minnesota in San Jose 2 seasons ago. He had a 9.12 save percentage as well as decent advanced stats. Then he has a full year in San Jose this year and absolutely stinks. He had an 8.83 and a 3.85, which was the worst numbers among a starter besides Elvis Merzlikins, who was god awful this year. So he was among the guys that started over 35 games last year. He's probably the worst goalie in the entire NHL, him or Elvis. So I think maybe he can turn around. Definitely that was impacted because he was on LA, who was horrendous last year. But going back to Gustafsson, as I mentioned, the Minnesota. Why am I saying Minneapolis? Going back to the Minnesota goalies, I think there might be something too. You see how when the Carolina goalies leave their system, they kind of fall off. I think we might be seeing something like that with Minnesota when their goalies come in, they look very good. Then once they leave, they're not very good. So when looking at Kakkonen, can he pull it around, turn it around? It's possible. He could be a half decent. His regular stats are going to suck this year just because San Jose Sharks suck. Him and Mackenzie Blackwood will probably have to play a ton of games, but he's still young enough where I maybe could see him turn around. A guy that is in dead last, 16th, that I can't really see turning around is Petr Mrazek. This year, .894, 3.66. He was better than Kakkonen last year, but at age 31 on a horrible Chicago Blackhawks team, I just can't see him turn it around. Kakkonen and I at least have some upside. I think Mrazek, or you can go with Soderblom, but I still think he's young and his stats were also pretty bad at the NHL level. I think Mrazek is slated to get absolutely slaughtered with shots on net this year on a bad Chicago team. We could be talking like 885 and like a 3.9. It's like somehow even worse than last year. It's going to be very interesting. Chicago's going to have to find their goalie of the future eventually, not right now. But yeah, overall, this is the full list. Saros, Hellebuck, Ottinger, Demko, Gustafsson, Georgiev, Vejmelka, Hill, Skinner, Markstrom, Grubauer, Gibson, Copley, Binnington, Kakkonen, Mrazek. But yeah, that's the show. Pre-recorded. We went for like 41 minutes. Jesus. Next episode, hopefully will be guests. No, hopefully will be an interview at the end. I'll probably do like 20 to 25 on like the news topics and then dive into the interview. And then going forward, hopefully some guests. Feel free to DM me what guests, what interviews you want to see. If you got any NHL connections, want to hit me up, set up an interview. Greatly appreciated. But yeah, thank you guys so much. I'm going to be clipping this up, putting all these clips out, just pumping out content. Want to give you guys the best possible content. Love you guys. Adios. See you for episode 5.